There is a moment, seared into the memory of every soldier who has ever witnessed real, primal power, when the world stops making sense. When everything you thought you understood about strength, about danger, about the careful architecture of what living things can and cannot do, simply collapses. I had that moment on a Tuesday morning, in a perfectly climate-controlled training facility, watching a 22-year-old human woman do a warm-up jog. My name is Corpex, Drill Sergeant, First Class Galactic Coalition Defense Forces. 15 cycles of service, hundreds of recruits broken down and rebuilt. I have shaped warriors from species so delicate that a raised voice constitutes physical trauma under coalition law. I have forged soldiers from the Quillnoth, creatures who lose consciousness at the sight of their own blood, and still manage to pass them through combat certification. I once trained a Galatian, a being that exists as a semi-liquid sentient mass, requiring a specialized containment suit just to maintain a coherent shape. And I got that through the obstacle course. I am not bragging. I am establishing credentials. Because what I am about to describe will sound like the exaggeration of a broken mind. And I need you to understand. I am one of the most decorated training officers in the Coalition. I do not exaggerate. I document. So when command informed me that my next intake group would include a human and a specimen from the newly inducted class, 12 deathworld species that the entire galaxy had spent the last cycle whispering about, I laughed. Not with excitement. Not with concern. I laughed the way you laugh at something that has already been decided and is slightly absurd. For integration purposes, command had said. Diplomatic relations, they had insisted. I had nodded, smiled, and thought, how much trouble could one human possibly be? The staging area of Nexus Station's training facility holds 50 beings comfortably. That morning it held 43, arranged in loose formation rows that I would be spending the next 4 days, turning into something that actually resembled military posture. The facility hummed around them, gravity regulators thrumming beneath the floor, climate systems maintaining a precise 22 degrees, safety monitoring arrays blinking patiently from every corner. 43 beings from 27 different worlds. Each one soft in their own species-specific way, each one about to learn that soft was a temporary condition. I had not bothered to memorize most of their names yet. Experience had taught me that roughly half would wash out by end of week 1. You learn to hold back emotional investment until someone proves they are worth the effort. I cataloged the usual suspects immediately. Kilrek, a Hav from a low-gravity moon colony, thin-boned and wide-eyed, standing with the fragile uncertainty of someone who had never experienced standard gravity before, and was quietly horrified by it. Thessaly, a brick, 4 arms, wide frame, and somehow managing to look both imposing and utterly untrained simultaneously. Vaughn, Quelix, Mera, names I noted. Faces I categorized. Potential I quietly assessed as marginal. And then my gaze reached the back row and I almost kept moving. Almost. She was easy to miss at first. Not because she lacked presence. I would come to understand that lack of presence was a concept. That did not apply to Mera Blake. But because in a crowd of fidgeting, nervous, quietly panicking alien beings experiencing their first morning of military service, she occupied a category entirely her own. She was not nervous. She was not fidgeting. She was not quietly panicking. Mera Blake stood in the back row with her arms folded across her chest, weight balanced slightly on her back foot, jaw set with the relaxed certainty of someone who has already decided that nothing in this room is going to surprise them. She was shorter than most of the recruits around her. Dark hair pulled back tight. Brown skin. Eyes that were not looking at me, they were scanning. Moving methodically across exits, equipment racks, structural supports, the positions of assistant instructors. Not with anxiety. With assessment. She looked like someone who had walked into a meeting they had already read the agenda for and found it underwhelming. I had seen fear dressed up as courage before. I could read false bravado from across a parade ground. This was not that. This was something quieter and, though I would not admit it until much later, considerably more unsettling. Listen up, I bellowed. My voice has shattered composure across 17 species. It bounced off the staging area walls and landed in the chests of 43 recruits like a physical force. 3 of them startled badly enough to stumble. 1 made a sound I can only describe as a distressed squeak. Kilrek, true to form, swayed. Mera Blake did not blink. I launched into the speech. The sacred speech. 15 cycles of refinement. Every word calibrated for maximum psychological impact. The weight of duty. The erasure of individual identity. The transformation of soft civilian creatures into something forged and purposeful. I had given this speech in 6 languages. I had given it to species with no concept of military hierarchy who had to have the entire premise explained from scratch. I had given it at 300 hours to exhausted recruits who were already crying. I was approximately 4 minutes in when Mera Blake yawned. Not a subtle yawn. Not a politely suppressed hand-over-mouth gesture of biological necessity. A full jaw-stretching, eyes briefly closing yawn, like I was narrating the least interesting thing she had ever been subjected to. The silence that followed was immediate and total. You. I turned the full weight of my attention on her and pointed. Human, do I bore you? She met my eyes. There was nothing hostile in her expression. That almost made it worse. No, drill sergeant. Just didn't sleep well. Station gravity's off from what I'm used to. A brief pause. Keep going. Keep going. She had told me to keep going. 2 recruits in the front row were staring at her with expressions that translated, across species, to approximately the same thing. You have just done something irreversible. One of them, I believe it was Quelix, made a soft, involuntary prayer gesture with their secondary hands. Kilrek fainted. But Kilrek fainted at most things, so that was noted and set aside. I smiled. The particular smile I reserve for recruits who have just made my job significantly more interesting. Recruit Blake, my voice dropped to something pleasant and completely terrifying. Since you're so well rested and clearly ready to contribute, you'll be leading the first exercise. She shrugged. An actual casual one-shouldered shrug. Sure, drill sergeant. Whatever you need. Oh, I thought. This is going to be wonderful. The obstacle course at Nexus Station represents decades of coalition military engineering. 6 planetary terrain classifications. Gravity fields adjustable from 0.3 to 2.1 standard. Temperature zones ranging from 10 below to 40 above. Automated obstacles. Timed sections. Physical challenges. Calibrated to test every major species physiology in the coalition roster. It is not easy. It is not supposed to be easy. The design philosophy is simple. Push recruits to the edge of their capability, so they discover exactly where that edge is. Standard completion under 20 minutes. 15 minutes earns commendation. 12 minutes earns honors distinction. The station record, held by a Corinthian officer whose species had evolved with natural, spring-loaded musculature, sat at 9 minutes and 47 seconds. A record that had stood for 6 cycles and was considered by most training officers to be functionally untouchable. I sent Mera, Blake, to the starting line and watched her assess the course with the same quiet, systematic attention she had turned on the staging area. No visible stretching, no breathing exercises, no adjustment of equipment. She simply looked at the course, looked back at me, and waited. On my mark, I said, raising my timer. 3, 2, 1, go. She went, and the first wrongness hit me within seconds. The opening wall was 3 meters of smooth composite paneling. Upper body strength. Technique. Controlled movements. Most recruits take 30 seconds. Some take 40. A few have taken over a minute. Blake hit the base of that wall at a dead sprint, planted a foot at the halfway point, caught the top edge with both hands, and pulled herself over in a motion so fluid and unbroken it looked almost like a continuous leap. 4 seconds. I checked my timer, checked it again, looked up. She was already at the balance beam. The beam ran across a mud pit 8 meters below. Standard procedure was arms out, slow, careful steps, center of gravity constantly managed. She ran across it at 3/4 speed without wobbling once, like the beam was just a narrower version of the floor. Behind me I heard Thessaly whisper something. I silenced them. But the question they had asked, is that normal for humans? Lodged itself somewhere in the back of my mind and did not leave. The crawl section next, 15 meters, 60 centimeters of clearance. Sensor wire above registering as wounds on contact. 3 to 4 minutes for a careful recruit. I watched the sensors begin to beep and felt a brief vindictive satisfaction. And then I read the alert type. Speed warning. System flagging possible equipment malfunction because the body moving through the tunnel was traveling faster than the designers had anticipated any body reasonably could. She was through it in 45 seconds. The rope climb. 10 meters. Standard gravity, a genuine test of upper body endurance. The point where most recruits first discover the gap between how strong they believe themselves to be and how strong they actually are. Mera Blake went up that rope like it had personally offended her. Hand over hand, steady and rhythmic, without the grunt of effort, without the telltale trembling of muscles fighting their own limits. At the top she slapped the sensor, controlled her descent, and landed in a ready crouch with her knees bent and her weight perfectly distributed. The tire run, the wall traverse, the final mud sprint. She accelerated through all of it. When she crossed the finish line, I stared at my timer for a very long time. 6 minutes, 32 seconds. Nearly half the standing record, set by a species with biological advantages Mera Blake simply did not possess. I looked up. She was at the water station. She took a drink, rolled her shoulders twice, nodded to herself, with the private satisfaction of someone completing a task that had been more or less what they expected. Then she looked at me. Good warm-up, she said. What's next, drill sergeant? The staging area was absolutely silent. Warm-up. She had called it a warm-up. I became aware that my expression had moved through several distinct phases in the past. 3 seconds and that 42. Recruits watching from the sidelines had witnessed all of them. Recruit Blake. My voice was controlled. Carefully, deliberately controlled. That was the primary obstacle course. The full course, designed by coalition, military engineers to push trained soldiers to their absolute limits. She looked at me. Those calm brown eyes, that faint, patient amusement. Right, she said. So, training stuff, I get it. What's the actual challenge? Something cracked. Not loudly. Just a quiet, structural sound deep in the foundation of everything I thought I knew about this job. That was the actual challenge. My voice carried across 3 decks. I am reasonably certain beings on the station's residential level heard me. I did not care. She held my gaze without flinching, without apology, and then she said the 6 words that would mark the exact moment. I stopped understanding my own career. Drill Sergeant Corpex. With respect, you're wrong.